just a lockdown in itself will change the media focus. I think the change in landscape and the evolving story will ultimately change media focus. I think we're already seeing other stories creep into the agenda, having had a couple of months of blanket coronavirus coverage. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen a big focus on the George Floyd story and the fallout from that, in particular in the UK last week and this week. And I think that will continue to evolve, and we'll see more and more stories that are non-COVID related coming into the agenda, and especially over the summer months when hopefully we'll see the number of cases of coronavirus decrease even further. When the pandemic started, we definitely saw an increase in desire from our audience to want to know about what the virus was, what the latest guidance was, what they should be doing. And that was definitely a kind of full-on response from them about wanting to see lots on the pandemic. As the situation has evolved and as we kind of get into a period where we see less updates, there is definitely an increasing desire to see other stories. And while audience figures peaked right at the start of the pandemic and were really high, we've seen a gradual decline in those over the weeks. So like I said, I think you'll be seeing an increasing number of non-coronavirus stories and an increase in positive stories because there's definitely demand there from audiences for that. Our approach to coronavirus staffing and working practices has been a constantly evolving situation ever since the pandemic started. It's something that we just keep an eye on as changes happen. We have, since the middle of March, had a much reduced newsroom. So in order to be able to maintain effective social distancing, we've had to reduce the number of people in the newsroom, which means an increase in the number of people working from home. Due to the size of our newsroom, I think we will be slow to implement any changes just so we can maintain social distancing. And in terms of the studio and gallery, that goes for those areas likewise. So we will see changes, but I think they'll be slow. And for example, for our newsroom, we are even thinking ahead towards the end of the year and trying to think about how the newsroom will look between now and then. We don't have any definitive answers yet, but it's a constant work in progress. The biggest change I think we will probably see permanently is the effects that the pandemic has had on news gathering and how we do that. I think the biggest one for me is interviews. Across all broadcasters, you'll have seen an increased amount of social video conference style interviews, predominantly on Skype and some other platforms as well. And I think you will probably see more of that as we realise an acceptance from audiences that that's fine. And actually, it's the broadcasters who've had an issue with that, and we have high standards that we want to adhere to. So I would imagine we'll see that stay, especially within TV, because obviously we need pictures, we need to see people. So if there are places that are hard to get to, for example, or time constraints, we can't get to places, I think that will be something that we stick with. Another thing that we've seen is people sometimes filming their own footage, be that B-roll in certain circumstances, or asking case studies to do a bit of their own filming, so we can have some nice setup shots. And it's been amazing how well some people have adapted to that and have become amazing videographers themselves. So I think we'll probably see a little bit of that sticking around as well if there's people that we can't get to. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more remote working as a result of it as well. The idea 3 months ago that we would have key people that work in the newsroom working remotely was just not a thought that any of us thought we'd ever see. However, we've realised that in some circumstances you can make it work, and you possibly don't need to see everyone in the newsroom every day. However, there are some roles where you do still need to be in the newsroom, and there is no replacement for that face-to-face contact. Another fallout, I would say, has been these sort of accelerated digital and technical advances that we've seen, that we've had to have as a result of all the remote working, and ways that we're news gathering differently. So I wouldn't be surprised if we stick with some form of video conferencing for our meetings. The idea that we'd be doing something like this and answering questions a few months back, it wouldn't have happened. So I think there are some good things that will change in the future. During the pandemic, planning has been really important. It's really hard to do a one-story program every day, so you need various elements set up for all the different pieces that you're doing. The digging that requires around that, the challenges of logistics has required a lot of extra work. So we did boost our team during the last 3 months in order to be able to effectively plan. And like I said, it's been hugely important. Our longer term planning has taken a bit of a back seat, just because none of us have known what the next day would bring sometimes, never mind the next week, the next month. And in terms of big events that we might plan for, obviously a lot of those have been cancelled. So, for example, I would have had somebody looking at the Olympics, which is now not happening. We are slowly seeing that come back into effect, though, as we, we'll reach more certain events happening. And also we'll want to bring back our investigations and all our digging for the longer term rather than focus on the shorter term. I know one of the other questions that was asked was about whether or not our planning structure and how we do things has changed. And I'd say apart from boosting the team, not really. Our meetings are all at the same time. Our deadlines are all at the same time. The change has been around logistics and having to think of different ways of doing things. So since we've had restrictions on people's movement and social distancing, we have had far fewer guests into the building, be it to be on air live or pre-recorded as part of an item. So, with everything, we've found workarounds and we've made it work. So we've been using a lot of video conferencing tech, mainly Skype, because it's quite reliable. And quite safe compared to some others in terms of what you can see on screen. And that has worked on the whole. There have been some challenges around quality, and people's strength of broadband signal can be an issue, especially in the times that we broadcast. That we have found that at 5 o'clock, when everyone downs tools for work, all of a sudden there's a spike in the amount of internet traffic. So we've had issues with broadband quality for our correspondents and presenter, because Sean Williams has been presenting from her spare bedroom 3 days a week for us. So that has been a big challenge technically in trying to make that work. Another thing has also been teaching people how to frame a shot, because that's something people have never had to think about before. So teach them about lighting, about where they are in shots, how to speak to camera. All of those things is something that we've had to do as we go along with interviews. And then with a lot of the apps you can use, being able to change your background has been a bit of a challenge, or just generally what's in the background and being mindful of that. There's obviously the very famous BBC interview where the kid runs in. So being mindful of that kind of thing has been a bit of a challenge. And just ensuring that with other times, we are still obviously governed by Ofcom and have to be very aware of branding and people, what they might post in the background as well. So that's something we've had to think quite carefully about. So The pandemic has obviously been quite a difficult and hard subject. It can feel quite dense a lot of the time. So one of the things that we like to do on Five News, generally, even in normal times, is be able to leave audiences with a smile on their face with their whole "and finally" slot. But we've been working extra hard to find uplifting stories in addition to that, just to try and give people some hope in what at times has felt like quite a bleak outlook. So positive stories, if you look hard enough, you can find positive stories anywhere. And that's always been our bread and butter. I think one that stuck out for me recently was a case of a care home who organised drive-through visits for their residents' families. And it was just such a sweet event where the residents all came out. They were all kind of looked after by their staff. They all had the little glass of bubbly that they were there to celebrate with, and the families all came through. And just that real sort of heartwarming, uplifting human interaction was just really lovely to see. But for me, any kinds of stories where you see that really nice human interaction is something that we try and seek out and try and bring people positivity as well as the kind of hard-hitting news as well.